Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today it's time to get trashy. I'm launching the GarbAugust Truth or Dare book tag. So August will see the second iteration of GarbAugust, my reading event dedicated to reading the trashiest of books. Last year I did a book tag for GarbAugust, so I thought I would do the same thing again this year. But this one is slightly different in that this is a truth or dare book tag. So we've got, I think, 6 questions for people to answer. But if you don't want to answer one of the questions, you can do a dare instead. And I'll be interested to see whether anybody actually does any of the dares. So we've got, as I say, 6 questions, 4 dares on the basis that I don't think anyone's going to not want to answer any of the 6 questions. So we should be okay there. So let me tell you what the dares are, and then I'll go through the questions. And so the dares are, show your favourite book with a spicy cover. Read out loud a trashy, spicy paragraph. Show a book you own but wouldn't read in public. Or show a clip from or link to your first BookTube video. So those are the dares. I'm going to do at least one of those dares because there's one question here I don't want to answer. So let me get into the questions then. So the first question is, how would you personally describe trashy books? So this is I think this is an interesting one, and I think everybody's definition of trash is probably slightly different, particularly when you go down to like an individual book level. There are some books which I think anybody would recognise as trash. But there are some that some people, might hold dear and not want to call trash. And, just to reiterate as well, when I call a book trashy, I'm not saying it's a bad book. I'm saying it's a trashy book, which is different. So my personal definition of trash is that these are books that have been written to cash in on some perceived demand in the public. So something that is popular, a current trend or something like that, something that is interesting people, that publishers try and get books out quickly to cash in on. Roy from the channel Roy Reads Anything did a fantastic description, which is better than any of the kind of rambly descriptions I've done over the last year or so. So he did a really great description in a video of his the other day, which I will link to. And he basically said, if you imagine like a chart with 2 axes, where the horizontal axis is like originality at one end and derivativeness at the other, and then the y-axis is like sensation at the top, and what was the word he used? Tastefulness at the bottom. So trashy books tend to be derivative. As I say, they're cashing in on on current trends and themes and things like that. They tend not to be great original works of art, and equally they tend to be sensational. They tend to try and grab the reader through kind of sleazy covers and things like that, rather than being tasteful. So in that in that imaginary graph, trashy books would be kind of up here in the derivative and sensational kind of quadrant, whereas a work of literature, so Cormac McCarthy or something like that, would be at the in the original and tasteful end. I don't know, Cormac McCarthy's not always tasteful, is he? But you get what I mean. So I think that's a really, really good way of thinking it. And the further towards that top right box that books are, the trashier they are. So yeah, that's my definition of trashy books. So next question is, what's the trashiest book you own? So this is really difficult for me to answer because I own so many trashy books, and I've recently relocated my kind of overflow books from the attic where they were into the garage. So I've got shelving in the garage now, which is just full of trashy books. Unfortunately, that shelving has now got other stuff piled in front of it before we get rid of that other stuff. So it's a bit difficult to get to. But I was thinking about this, and I think probably the trashiest stuff I own, just in terms of volume as well as level of trashiness, is the Gore series by John Norman. So I don't own all of the books in the Gore series by any means, because I think there are about 30 now, but I own probably 15 plus. So this is an example of one of them. So this is Explorers of Gore, which is the 13th book in the Gore series, from, when did it come out? I guess this is this looks 70s to me. Yeah, 79. So the Gore series of books were hugely popular in the 70s in particular. So a series of books that kind of cashed in on the success of Lord of the Rings, in the States in particular, and that kind of boom in interest in fantasy, but also are incredibly sleazy. So also, cash in on that side of things. And you can see, there's a lady on the cover here with a kind of bikini on, which is it's kind of like a Stone Age style bikini, which is barely containing her, and that's very much what the Gore books came to be about. And they get sleazier and sleazier over time. So the original concept is kind of borrows from the Barsoom books by Edgar Rice Burroughs, so rips those off quite comprehensively in terms of being about an Earthman who gets mysteriously transported to this other world, where he has to kind of figure out how to become part of the society, and make a life for himself, much like John Carter does in the Barsoom books, and goes on various adventures. And the first few books are enjoyable pulpy adventure. One of the aspects of the Gorean society is that women are basically treated as slaves. There are some free women, but the majority of women are slave girls, to use the terminology of the books. And as the series progresses, John Norman gets more and more obsessed with this side of the story, and in examining that, and basically his concept is, his philosophy is, and he was indeed actually a philosophy professor, worryingly enough. In fact, he's still alive. So his philosophy was that the women of Gore accept their role and accept that is the natural order of things, and indeed welcome it. And I think the books are very much a response to the women's lib movement in the States, and the growth of feminism, and the fact that men felt threatened by that. So they are cashing in on so many different things. So the kind of boom in fantasy, cashing in on Lord of the Rings, ripping off Edgar Rice Burroughs, cashing in on public, or playing into male fears about the feminist movement, and also throwing in kinky sex and stuff like that. So definitely very trashy. And as I say, there are 30 plus books in the series, and terrifyingly, John Norman is still writing them. So I don't know how old he is now, and I don't know if they're exactly self-published now, or if they're just kind of published by a very small publisher, but he's still churning them out on Kindle. As I say, in their heyday in the 70s, they were really big sellers, and Door Books were a big publisher, and in the UK they were published by, I don't know if it's New English Library or Corgi, but again a big publisher. So they were they were a big deal in their day. But yeah, definitely very, very trashy. Okay, so the next question is the question I'm not going to answer, which is, what is the trashiest situation you've ever been in? I've definitely been in some situations that were maybe not full on trashy, but perilously close. So I'm not going to answer this question. Instead, I'm going to choose to do one of the dares, and I'm going to do the show a clip from your first BookTube video. So my first BookTube video was so different in style from the way I do things now. It was a review of Edge the Loner, the first book in the Edge series. I don't appear in the video. I'm very wooden, had not kind of develop my confidence in front of the camera. So yeah, here is a brief clip from that first video for your entertainment. Good evening and welcome to the first video from the new Olly channel. My son has challenged me to create a YouTube channel and get more views than him. So this is my first attempt. So apologies for any technical mishaps or excessive rambling from me, of which there is likely to be lots. Okay, next question then is another one that people may choose not to answer. So there's two options for this question. Just just to make it maybe a bit more acceptable. So the first part of the question, or the first option for the question is, have you ever read a book so spicy that you cease to be master of your domain? And the alternative question, should you want to not do the dare, is which book has the best smut scene you've ever read? So I'm going to answer the first part of the question with a big caveat that so there are books that I've read in my life that caused me to lose control, shall we say, and need to take care of myself. But only when I was a teenager. So when I was a teenager, probably typically with many male teenagers, pretty much anything would do that. So yeah, there are definitely some books that I remember. I remember a couple of like science fiction books that I'd got like remaindered, picked up like really cheap in supermarkets, where there were like a couple of scenes that I read many times, shall we say. Right, so let's move swiftly on to the next question. So have you ever given or received a trashy book as a gift? If so, what was the book and what was your or their reaction? So yes, I am blessed to receive trashy books all the time, because people know that I like trashy books. So I got sent, and I don't know where they are. Oh, they're over here. Hold on. Yeah, so I got sent these 4 trashy books by Sian and Bert from the channel Pastori Time recently. So 3 books from the Adam Steele series by George G. Gilman, and 1 from the Sergeant series by Gordon Davis, also known as Len Levison. So yeah, wonderful trashy books. My sister gave me a trashy book for my birthday, amongst other things. She gave me one of the Fox books. So yeah, I definitely get given trashy books, and I delight in receiving trashy books. Have I ever given trashy books as a gift? I'm trying to think. Oh, actually, I have. So when I was a kid, and I must have been like quite young, like 10 or something like that. My mum, it was like when the Flowers in the Attic, the Dollenganger books by V.C. Andrews were like really big. My mum was reading the series, and I bought my mum the second, I think it was either the second or third book in the series for her birthday, which, if you know what those books are about, is a bit iffy. So yeah, so I have received a trashy book. I have definitely received trashy books as a gift, and I have given a trashy book as a gift. And I think I can't remember what my mum's reaction was, but she certainly enjoyed the books. Okay, final question then. So kind of related to the last one, actually. Did you ever read trashy books from your parents' shelves as a kid? So as a kid, were you aware that there were books on your parents' shelves that were maybe a little bit salacious, and that you were intrigued by and pulled off their shelves to look at? So the answer to that is yes for me, albeit not the Flowers in the Attic books, which I don't think I really realised what they were about at all as a kid. But I do remember thumbing through my dad's copy of The Fog by James Herbert. So that was a book that, when I was a kid, in about, I guess it was probably about 82, 83, that sort of time. So when I was kind of 9 or 10, everyone was talking about the Fog at school. It was like a book that older kids' older brothers had read and, were fascinated by, and I remember hearing about scenes. So one scene in particular, which, if you've read the book, that most infamous scene in the school gym, I definitely remember being told about. And I do remember trying to find it in my dad's copy and trying to find the sex scenes that I'd heard were in the book as well. Now, there was one scene that was described to me, I remember vividly being described to me at the time, which is not in the book at all. So this one scene, it was clearly an invention of someone's older brother. Whether or not they did it to wind us up, or whether they genuinely thought it was in the book, I don't know. But and I'm not going to tell you what it was, because it's too disgusting to talk about on the channel. Even worse than the scenes that are in the book. So yeah, that's one. So the Fog is definitely one I remember doing that with. Right, so because I'm a good sport, and because I wouldn't expect anyone to have to do things I'm not prepared to do myself, I am going to do the other 3 dares as well. So I've already done the show a clip from your first BookTube video, a dare. I will now do the other 3. So show your favourite book with a spicy cover. So not necessarily my favourite book with a spicy cover, but my favourite spicy cover. Let's put it that way. So this is Slime by John Helkin, which has this rather explicit cover. So Slime is a book about killer jellyfish, and here we see a young lady who's been attacked in her bath by a killer jellyfish. The tagline, in case you can't see it, for the book is "Turn on the tap and die of terror." So I remember being fascinated by this cover as a teenage boy, to the extent that I tracked down a copy as an adult and bought it. So yes, definitely a slightly saucy cover there. Next one then, read out loud a trashy, spicy paragraph. So I've got one here for you, and I won't read too much. And if you've got children present, you might want to mute the video or fast forward or whatever. So I'm going to read you a brief passage from Killer Crabs by Guy and Smith. So Guy and Smith, a master of writing bad sex. So let me read you a bit of Killer Crabs. I like men who are primitive. Her hand strayed out to his hardness, encircled it lightly, and smoothed the material over it. For some seconds she studied its outline. Clin was watching her thighs closely. They had parted slightly, no more than an inch or so, just sufficient for him to see part of the damp pinkness which lay beneath the dark hair. He waited for them to open still further, but they didn't. Caroline de Brunner wasn't going to make it easy for him this time. I like big things. She was looking down at his erection, stroking it through the soiled cotton, but making no effort to slide her long fingers inside his shorts. Big cars, big houses, big men. So I will leave it there and leave it up to your imaginations what happens next between the improbably named Clin and Caroline de Brunner. So the final dare then is show a book you own but wouldn't read in public. So this is, I was sent a little while ago, a wonderful box of trashy books by one of my subscribers, Eerie B. This is one of them, The Adopters by William Hegner, which is a spicy book, from what I can tell, about a media mogul, but contains a cover which I definitely wouldn't want to be seen reading on the bus. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed watching that video as much as I've enjoyed making it. Time for me to tag some people. So all of my GarbAugust co-hosts are tagged, and there's an army of us. But I also wanted to tag 4 channels who aren't co-hosts, but who are great supporters of GarbAugust. So those channels are Booknick, Pastory Time, Allegories, Horror Stories, and Bad is Rad 2. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Hope I haven't offended anybody too deeply. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're really good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.